The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Colonel Sarah Martinez stepped out of her sedan. She smoothed her freshly pressed uniform and adjusted her cap, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. Today marked the beginning of her new assignment as base commander, a position she had worked tirelessly to achieve over her 20-year military career. Sarah had always been determined to break barriers. Growing up in a small town where women were expected to follow traditional paths, she chose the military instead. Her father, a retired sergeant, had been skeptical at first but eventually became her biggest supporter. Her mother worried constantly, but never tried to discourage her daughter's ambitions. The base she was now assigned to command had a reputation for being particularly traditional. Fort Harrison had been operational for over 50 years, and in all that time, it had never been commanded by a woman. Sarah knew she would face challenges, but she was prepared. Her previous assignments had taught her that respect had to be earned, regardless of rank or gender. As she approached the main gate, Sarah noticed the guards straightening their postures. However, their expressions seemed confused rather than respectful. The younger guard, barely out of training by the look of him, whispered something to his partner. The older guard, a staff sergeant with graying hair and weathered features, stepped forward. Sarah walked confidently toward the checkpoint, her military bearing evident in every step. She had learned early in her career that confidence was often the difference between being taken seriously and being dismissed. Her briefcase contained all the necessary paperwork for her transfer, along with detailed plans she had been developing for the base's modernization. The staff sergeant held up his hand as she approached. His expression was polite but firm, the kind of look she had seen countless times before when people made assumptions based on her appearance rather than her qualifications. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you can't go any further without proper authorization," he said, his voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who had stopped many unauthorized visitors before. Sarah paused, studying the man's face. She could see he wasn't being deliberately disrespectful, just following what he believed to be protocol. The younger guard behind him looked nervous, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. "I have authorization," Sarah replied calmly, reaching into her briefcase. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, your new base commander." The staff sergeant's expression didn't change immediately. He glanced at the documents she handed him, then back at her face, then at the documents again. The younger guard leaned in to look over his partner's shoulder, his eyes widening as he read the official transfer orders. "Ma'am, with all due respect," the staff sergeant said carefully, "we weren't informed about any change in command. Colonel Thompson is still listed as our commanding officer in our daily briefings." Sarah maintained her composure, though she felt a familiar frustration building inside her. This wasn't the first time administrative delays had complicated her assignments. Military bureaucracy moved slowly, and information didn't always reach the appropriate personnel in time. "I understand the confusion," she said. "Colonel Thompson was transferred unexpectedly due to a family emergency. I was brought in to replace him on short notice. Your briefing materials probably haven't been updated yet." The staff sergeant examined the documents more carefully, noting the official seals and signatures. However, his training told him to be cautious about unexpected changes in command, especially when the new commander wasn't what he expected. Meanwhile, other personnel began to notice the commotion at the gate. Several soldiers stopped their morning routines to observe the situation. Word began to spread quickly through the nearby buildings that there was some kind of issue at the main entrance. Sarah could feel the weight of their stares and whispered conversations. She had been in similar situations before, where her presence challenged people's expectations and assumptions. Each time, she had learned something new about leadership and about herself. The younger guard finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Sergeant Davis, the paperwork looks legitimate. All the seals and signatures match what we've seen before." Sergeant Davis nodded slowly, but his expression remained cautious. "Ma'am, I hope you understand that we need to verify this through proper channels. It's not that we doubt your credentials, but we have protocols to follow." Sarah appreciated his professionalism, even as she recognized the underlying skepticism. She had faced similar situations throughout her career, from her early days as a lieutenant to her recent promotion to colonel. Each challenge had made her stronger and more determined to prove herself through actions rather than arguments. "Of course, Sergeant," she replied. "What verification process do you need to complete?" As Sergeant Davis reached for his radio to contact the base administration office, Sarah noticed more personnel gathering at a respectful distance. Some appeared curious, others seemed surprised, and a few looked openly skeptical. She could almost hear their thoughts. Was this really their new commander? Or was there some mistake? The radio crackled to life as Sergeant Davis made contact with the administrative office. "Base Admin. This is Gate 1. We have a situation here that requires immediate verification." While they waited for a response, Sarah observed the base beyond the checkpoint. The buildings were well maintained, and the personnel she could see appeared disciplined and professional. However, she also noticed subtle signs that the base could benefit from modernization and updated procedures. The younger guard, whose name tag read Johnson, shifted nervously from foot to foot. He kept glancing at Sarah, then at Sergeant Davis, clearly uncomfortable with the uncertainty of the situation. "Ma'am," Johnson said quietly, "I apologize for any inconvenience. We just want to make sure everything is handled properly." Sarah smiled at him, recognizing his genuine desire to do the right thing. "There's no need to apologize, soldier. You're following procedure, which is exactly what I would expect from personnel under my command." Her words carried a subtle reminder of the authority she claimed, but her tone remained friendly and understanding. She had learned that commanding respect required a balance of firmness and approachability. The radio crackled again, and an irritated voice responded to Sergeant Davis's call. "Gate 1. What kind of situation are you dealing with?" "We're busy preparing for the morning briefing." Sergeant Davis glanced at Sarah before responding. "We have someone claiming to be our new base commander, but we haven't received any notification of a change in leadership. We need immediate verification of transfer orders." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Sarah could hear muffled conversations through the radio as the administrative staff discussed the situation. She remained patient, knowing that rushing or becoming demanding would only create more problems. Finally, the radio crackled with a new voice, this one belonging to someone with more authority. "Gate 1. Please describe the documents you've been presented with." Sergeant Davis read the relevant information from Sarah's transfer orders, including reference numbers, signatures, and official seals. As he spoke, Sarah noticed that more base personnel had gathered to observe the situation, their curiosity evident in their expressions and body language. The crowd was beginning to make both guards nervous. Johnson kept glancing at the growing number of onlookers, while Sergeant Davis maintained his professional demeanor but showed signs of stress around his eyes. Sarah realized that this situation was becoming more public than anyone wanted. If she truly was their new commander, this kind of confusion and delay would not reflect well on the base's efficiency or her ability to take control smoothly. "Sergeant Davis," she said quietly, "perhaps we could handle this verification process in a more private setting. I don't think any of us want this to become a spectacle." Before he could respond, the radio crackled with urgent activity. Multiple voices could be heard in the background, and someone was clearly searching through files and computer records. The administrative confusion was apparently more widespread than anyone had initially realized. The tension at the gate continued to build as more personnel gathered around the checkpoint. Sarah noticed officers among the crowd now, their ranks visible on their uniforms. She could see them discussing the situation in hushed tones, some pointing in her direction, while others shook their heads in apparent disbelief. Major Williams, the base's executive officer, pushed through the crowd with purposeful strides. His expression was serious as he approached the gate, clearly having been summoned to resolve the growing commotion. Sarah recognized his rank immediately and prepared herself for what she knew would be a crucial conversation. "What exactly is going on here?" Major Williams demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. His eyes moved from the guards to Sarah, lingering on her uniform and the colonel's insignia on her shoulders. Sergeant Davis snapped to attention. "Sir, this woman claims to be our new base commander, but we haven't received any official notification of Colonel Thompson's replacement. We're attempting to verify her credentials." Major Williams extended his hand toward Sarah. "May I see your orders, ma'am?" Sarah handed him the transfer documents, watching his face carefully as he read through them. She could see his expression change from skepticism to confusion, then to something approaching concern. His military training had taught him to recognize authentic documentation, and what he was reading appeared to be completely legitimate. "These orders are dated 3 days ago," Major Williams said, looking up at Sarah. "Why wasn't I notified of this change?" "I was told that Colonel Thompson had to leave immediately due to a family emergency," Sarah explained. The transfer was expedited, and normal notification procedures may have been bypassed in the interest of maintaining continuity of command. Major Williams frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. As executive officer, he should have been among the first to know about any change in command. The fact that he had been left uninformed suggested either a serious breakdown in communication or something more concerning. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to make some phone calls to verify this situation," he said. "In the meantime, would you mind waiting in the visitors' area?" The suggestion that she wait in the visitors' area rather than being escorted to the commander's office was not lost on Sarah. She was being treated as a guest rather than as the commanding officer, which was both insulting and potentially problematic if she was indeed supposed to be taking command immediately. "Major Williams," Sarah said calmly, "I understand your caution, but every minute we spend on verification is a minute that this base is operating without clear command authority. If there's truly been a communication breakdown, we need to resolve it quickly." Her words carried weight, and Major Williams recognized the truth in them. A military base without clear command structure was vulnerable to confusion and potential security issues. He nodded slowly, his expression becoming more thoughtful. "You make a valid point, Colonel," he said, using her rank for the first time. "Let me contact division headquarters directly. They should be able to provide immediate clarification." While Major Williams made his phone calls, Sarah found herself surrounded by curious personnel who were trying to understand what was happening. She could hear fragments of conversations around her, with some soldiers expressing support for giving her a chance while others remained skeptical. Lieutenant Chen, one of the younger officers, approached her with obvious curiosity. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what's your background? We've never had a female commander at Fort Harrison before." Sarah appreciated the direct question and saw it as an opportunity to begin establishing her credibility with the base personnel. "I've commanded 2 previous installations, including Fort Bradley in Colorado and Camp Morrison in Texas. I also served tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, with experience in both combat operations and administrative management." Her response seemed to impress Lieutenant Chen and several other personnel who were listening. Combat experience carried significant weight in military culture, and her mention of previous command positions demonstrated that she wasn't simply being promoted beyond her capabilities. Major Williams returned from his phone calls looking troubled. His expression suggested that the situation was more complicated than anyone had initially realized. He approached Sarah with obvious reluctance, clearly uncomfortable with what he had to report. "Ma'am, I've spoken with division headquarters, and there seems to be some confusion at their level as well," he said quietly. Colonel Thompson's departure was indeed sudden, but they're not entirely certain about the status of his replacement. Sarah felt a chill of concern. If division headquarters was confused about her assignment, there might be a more serious problem with her transfer orders. However, she also knew that military bureaucracy was notorious for communication failures, especially during emergency reassignments. "What kind of confusion are we talking about, Major?" she asked. "They're saying that Colonel Thompson's replacement was supposed to be Colonel Harrison from Fort Stevens, but he was involved in a training accident yesterday and is currently hospitalized. Your name was mentioned as a possible interim commander, but they're not sure if those orders were officially processed." The crowd around them had grown quiet, clearly sensing that something significant was developing. Sarah could feel the weight of their attention as they waited to see how this situation would resolve itself. She realized that she was facing a bureaucratic nightmare that could undermine her authority before she even had a chance to establish it. If her orders weren't officially processed, she might be in an extremely awkward position of claiming authority she didn't actually possess. "Major Williams," she said carefully, "regardless of the confusion at division level, these orders appear to be legitimate and properly signed. Until we receive official word otherwise, I suggest we proceed as if I am indeed your new commanding officer." Major Williams hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the ambiguity of the situation. Military protocol demanded clear chains of command and unambiguous authority, but the current circumstances seemed to defy such clarity. Before he could respond, Sergeant Davis's radio crackled with urgent activity. A new voice came through, speaking with obvious authority and urgency. "Gate 1. This is Colonel Peterson from Division Headquarters. Is there a Colonel Martinez at your location?" Sergeant Davis looked at Major Williams, who nodded for him to respond. "Yes, sir. Colonel Martinez is here at the main gate. Put her on the radio immediately. We need to speak with her directly." Sarah took the radio with steady hands, despite the butterflies in her stomach. Whatever was about to happen would likely determine not only her immediate status, but potentially the rest of her military career. "This is Colonel Martinez," she said into the radio. "Colonel Martinez, this is Colonel Peterson. I apologize for the confusion surrounding your assignment. We've been dealing with multiple emergency reassignments due to Colonel Harrison's accident and Colonel Thompson's family situation. Your orders are legitimate, but they were processed through an expedited channel that bypassed normal notification procedures." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she maintained her professional composure. "Understood, sir. What do you need from me to resolve this situation?" 1. We're sending updated notification documents to Fort Harrison immediately. Major Williams should receive them within the hour. In the meantime, you are authorized to assume command, effective immediately. We need continuity of leadership during this transition period. The crowd around the gate had grown completely silent, everyone straining to hear the radio conversation. When Colonel Peterson confirmed Sarah's authority, she could see expressions changing from skepticism to acceptance among many of the personnel present. Major Williams stepped forward as Sarah handed back the radio. His posture had changed subtly, now showing the deference appropriate when addressing a commanding officer rather than a questionable visitor. "Colonel Martinez, I apologize for the confusion and delay. Please allow me to escort you to the command building and begin the proper turnover procedures." Sarah nodded graciously, understanding that Major Williams had simply been doing his job in a difficult situation. "Thank you, Major. I appreciate everyone's diligence in following proper procedures, even under unusual circumstances." As they walked toward the command building, Sarah could hear the crowd beginning to disperse behind them. However, she was also aware that news of the morning's events would spread quickly throughout the base, and she would need to address any concerns or doubts that might arise from the confused beginning to her command. The command building buzzed with activity as word of the new commander's arrival spread throughout Fort Harrison. Sarah walked beside Major Williams, observing everything around her with the keen eye of an experienced officer taking stock of her new responsibilities. The building was well maintained but showed signs of traditional military efficiency rather than modern innovation. As they entered the commander's office, Sarah was struck by how quickly the atmosphere had changed. Staff members who had been curious onlookers just minutes earlier now snapped to attention as she passed. The power of confirmed authority was remarkable in its ability to transform skepticism into respect, at least on the surface. "Colonel Martinez," Major Williams said as he gestured toward the large oak desk that would now be hers. "Colonel Thompson left very suddenly, but most of his ongoing projects are documented in these files. I can brief you on current operations whenever you're ready." Sarah appreciated his professionalism, especially given the awkward beginning to their working relationship. She set her briefcase down and took her first look around the office that would be her command center. The walls displayed the traditional military decorations and unit histories that she expected, along with photos of previous commanders dating back to the base's establishment. "Before we begin operational briefings," Sarah said, "I think we need to address what happened at the gate this morning. Word of that confusion will spread quickly, and I want to get ahead of any concerns it might create among base personnel." Major Williams nodded, clearly understanding her concern. In military culture, confidence in leadership was essential for effective operations, and any doubts about a commander's authority could undermine morale and efficiency. "I've already asked the senior staff to gather for an emergency meeting in 30 minutes, he said. "We can address the situation directly with the key personnel and ensure accurate information reaches everyone." As if on cue, there was a knock at the office door. Sergeant Davis and Private Johnson stood in the doorway, both looking somewhat uncomfortable, but determined. Sarah gestured for them to enter, curious about what had brought them to see her so quickly. "Ma'am," Sergeant Davis began, "Private Johnson and I wanted to apologize for the delay at the gate this morning. We were just following procedure, but we realize it may have created an awkward situation for you." Sarah smiled, impressed by their willingness to address the situation directly. "Sergeant, you have nothing to apologize for. You were doing exactly what good soldiers should do when faced with unexpected circumstances. I respect the fact that you followed protocol, rather than simply accepting my claims at face value." Private Johnson looked relieved at her response. "Thank you, ma'am. We also wanted you to know that most of the personnel who witnessed what happened this morning are actually impressed by how you handled the situation. You stayed calm and professional, even when things were uncertain." The comment surprised Sarah, as she had been more focused on the potential negative impact of the confusion, rather than considering how her behavior during the crisis might have been perceived positively. It reminded her that leadership was often demonstrated most clearly during difficult moments, rather than easy ones. "I appreciate you telling me that," she said. "Now, I believe you both have duties to return to, and I have a base to learn about." After the guards left, Major Williams began his briefing on current base operations. Fort Harrison housed approximately 2,500 personnel across various units, with missions ranging from training new recruits to supporting overseas deployments. The base also served as a logistics hub for several smaller installations in the region. As Major Williams spoke, Sarah took detailed notes, while also observing his presentation style and attitude. She was pleased to see that he was thorough and professional, providing honest assessments of both strengths and challenges facing the base. His willingness to discuss problems frankly suggested that he would be a valuable partner in implementing necessary improvements. "One area that needs attention," Major Williams continued, "is our communication systems. As you experienced this morning, information doesn't always flow efficiently between different levels of command. Colonel Thompson had been working on upgrade proposals, but the project was delayed due to budget constraints." Sarah made a note about the communication issues, recognizing them as both a practical problem and a symbol of larger challenges. Military effectiveness depended on reliable information flow, and any weaknesses in communication systems could have serious consequences. The senior staff meeting convened precisely on time, with department heads and unit commanders filling the conference room. Sarah could see curiosity and evaluation in their expressions as they waited to meet their new commanding officer. She knew that this first meeting would be crucial in establishing her credibility and leadership style. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, standing confidently at the head of the conference table, "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, your new base commander. I know this morning's events created some confusion, and I want to address that directly before we discuss operational matters." She briefly explained the circumstances of her rapid assignment and the communication breakdown that had caused the delay at the gate. Her straightforward approach seemed to resonate with the staff members, who appreciated having the situation clarified openly rather than allowing rumors and speculation to spread. "Moving forward," Sarah continued, "I want to establish clear expectations for communication and operational efficiency. The confusion this morning highlighted some systemic issues that we need to address, beginning with how information flows throughout this installation." Captain Rodriguez, the base communications officer, raised his hand. "Ma'am, we've been requesting communication system upgrades for over a year, But we've been told that funding isn't available. How do you plan to address that constraint? Sarah appreciated the direct question, recognizing it as both a legitimate operational concern and a test of her problem-solving abilities. Captain, I've dealt with similar budget constraints at my previous commands. Often, the solution involves demonstrating clear cost-benefit relationships and finding creative approaches to funding. I'll be reviewing all pending upgrade requests and developing strategies to move them forward. Her response seemed to satisfy Captain Rodriguez and several other staff members who had been watching to see how she handled challenging questions. Leadership in the military often required finding solutions to problems that others had deemed impossible to solve. As the meeting continued, Sarah outlined her initial priorities for the base. These included improving communication systems, updating training procedures, enhancing security protocols, and fostering better relationships with the local community. Each priority reflected her experience from previous commands and her observations during her brief time at Fort Harrison. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, the deputy commander, asked about her timeline for implementing changes. Ma'am, how quickly do you plan to move on these initiatives? Change can be disruptive if not managed carefully. Sarah nodded, understanding the concern behind the question. Military units valued stability and predictability, and new commanders who tried to change too much too quickly often created more problems than they solved. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, change will be implemented systematically and with extensive input from all of you, she replied. My experience has taught me that the best improvements come from listening to the people who understand current operations most thoroughly. I'll be spending the next few weeks learning about your specific challenges and capabilities before proposing any significant modifications. The reassurance seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. Several staff members exchanged glances that suggested approval of her measured approach to leadership and change management. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic about her new command. The morning's confusion had actually provided an unexpected opportunity to demonstrate her leadership style under pressure, and the staff members seemed willing to give her a chance to prove herself. Major Williams approached her as the conference room emptied. Colonel, if I may say so, I think that went very well. The staff appreciates your direct communication style and your willingness to address the morning's events openly. Sarah gathered her notes and looked around the conference room that would host many future meetings during her command. Major, I've learned that honesty and transparency are usually the best foundation for effective leadership. This morning's confusion could have undermined my authority if we had tried to hide it or pretend it didn't happen. As they walked back to her office, Sarah reflected on the unexpected beginning to her new assignment. What could have been a career-damaging embarrassment had instead become an opportunity to demonstrate grace under pressure and to establish the tone for her leadership style. The afternoon brought a steady stream of meetings with various department heads and unit commanders, each providing detailed briefings on their areas of responsibility. Sarah listened carefully to each presentation, asking probing questions and taking extensive notes about both capabilities and challenges. By evening, she had a comprehensive understanding of Fort Harrison's operations and had begun to develop relationships with her key staff members. More importantly, word had spread throughout the base that their new commander was competent, approachable, and committed to understanding their needs before implementing changes. As she prepared to leave her office that first day, Sarah looked out the window at the base she now commanded. Soldiers were completing their evening routines, and the organized activity reminded her of why she had chosen a military career in the first place. The opportunity to lead dedicated professionals in service to their country was both a privilege and a responsibility she took seriously. The morning's confusion at the gate already seemed like ancient history. What mattered now was proving that the guard's eventual recognition of her authority had been well placed, and that Fort Harrison would thrive under her leadership. The real test of her command was just beginning, but Sarah felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.